Hey guys, my name is Jason and welcome to my today we're gonna doing our series of C++ programming. We're just gonna start off with the basics, like we're just gonna download C++ and all that. But first, I have some basic book recommendations which I literally never see any programming tutorial even recommend, because there's so much information in these books. They're like a must-have if you're gonna learn how to program. Basically the right way. I mean, most people learn programming for the fun of it though, so I mean, I'm just saying. But if you want a job in programming, I recommend this book for sure. The book I recommend is a C++ from control structures through object book. Any edition is fine, but this is actually the book that I used when I took the class, and I thought it was a pretty good. Overall, there's also it's gonna be down in the description, so if you guys want to go get that, you could. I'm gonna just put down the link. There's also links to practices and all that I'm also gonna go through as well later on. And we're gonna start doing how to solve certain C++ problems and stuff like that, and how am I stepping through the problems and how to solve it the best way that I can. Well, to be honest, if you don't know how to download any kind of software such as C++ and all that, I don't know if programming is the best fit for you. The IDEs that I recommend if you're gonna program in C++, and it's basically the easiest IDE to set up in my opinion. The IDE is Visual Studios, which I basically use Visual Studios for everything from website building. I mean, there's so much you could do on Visual Studios, so I really recommend it for any programming task. Alright, so the first thing to programming, I don't know if most tutorials go through this, is the computer architecture, bro. Like that is, so the computer has basically a few main components that you need to know about, like the CPU, the main memory, secondary storage, input devices, and output the CPU, also known as the central processor unit. I know that's a long name, but you know, it has two parts: the control unit and the operation unit. The control unit basically controls all the operation using control signals that the computer sends to the individual components. The CPU also has the arithmetic and logic unit, which is designed to do mathematic operation. And the CPU basically goes through the fetch, decode, and execute loop. The fetch process gets a program from the main memory, and the main memory is basically the RAM in your computer. And after getting the program from the main memory, it decodes it and generates electronic signals. And after that, the execute process takes place and sends the appropriate signals to the appropriate component, which performs their necessary task. That's basically what the CPU does. As I said before, the main memory is the RAM in your computer. The RAM is also known as the random access memory, and it's a volatile memory type. So that means when you close your computer, the RAM gets deleted, so whatever was on there before permanently. So that's why when you turn off your computer, like let's say your computer's running slow or it freezes at one point, when you reboot it, it increases in speed, right? I mean, I think most people have seen that happen. The secondary storage is permanent memory, so that's like no matter how many times you turn off your computer and turn it back on, the information on the secondary storage is always going to be there. Most people Most people's secondary storage is their hard drive or SSD, which is what we currently use. I think most people have those. But floppy disk and CDs and USB drives are also an example of secondary storage. The input devices is an input device is what the computer uses to collect information. And this will some examples of input devices is your keyboard, mouse, scanner, and microphone that I'm currently using to create this YouTube video. The output device is basically what information is sent to. Like you could create a program to write something to your monitor. Some examples of output devices is your monitor, printer, and speaker. Alright, so what is programming? And I hate when people says what is coding or say something about coding, because that's not even the right term. It's really a computer program is a set of instructions that tells the computer how to solve a problem. This allows the computer to do like literally anything you can imagine the computer could do. Like, to be honest with you, if you know the right way to solve the problem or how to get the necessary result, the computer could do basically whatever you want it to. With programming, there's a plethora of computer languages. To be honest, there's so many programming languages. I don't even know them all. But some examples would be C#, C, Python, JavaScript, and several others. Like, it's insane. There's two different types of programming languages: high-level languages and low-level languages. The high-level languages are programming languages that humans can understand, right? Which would be like Python and C# and stuff like that. Low-level languages are machine languages, which is basically languages that the machine understands in itself. And your computer basically only understands zeros and ones. That's all it understands. And when you're using high-level languages, it gets interpreted by your compiler so that the computer understands it. So if you've ever searched up anything about programming and stuff like that, you probably heard of the word algorithm. And an algorithm is basically a set of steps that is used to solve a problem. Now that we know the basics, okay, a basic program contains keywords, program defined identifiers, operators, punctuation, and syntax, right? A keyword is a reserved word that you can't use to name your objects, I guess, I would say. Okay, some examples would be int, double, and float, which you use to identify data. Like, for example, let's say you want to assign 10 to A, alright? So you're gonna write int A equals 10, and then you would end in a semicolon at the end, because that's how you gotta end all statements, which is like a line. And if you don't, it would generate a syntax error when you compile it. Programmer defined words are words that you create yourself. It's basic. It's as the word says. So let's say int total, right? Total of whatever you want to put. So that's what the word total is, what you created basically to store the total. Let's say the total is 100. Alright, so the word total would be the programmer defined word, and the 100 would be what you store and in total. So punctuation. Alright, so in C++, you could actually assign a data type to multiple words. Let's say you want to initialize 5 variables, right? You would put int, let's say tree, right? And then you would put a semicolon, dog, cat, rose, and tiger, okay? So all of that, and then you would end that in a semicolon, because you always got to end in a semicolon. So that's a different way of initializing multiple variables on the same line. Now, operators are operations that are performed on operand. So let's say int total was 5 plus, which would be the operator t, and t would be let's say 6, right? So t would be 6, so it would be 5 plus t, and then you would end in the semicolon. So the plus would be the operator, and the operand would be the other. So syntax, as I've stated before, are rules are rules that must be followed by every programmer that is basically using C++. Some examples of syntax that you have to follow is not being able to use reserved words as object names. So one of or also known as reserved. So let's say you want to use, you can't use if as an object name because that's already defined in the C++ library. So you can't really use that, or it would create a syntax error. Also, not using a semicolon at the end of your statement in C++ will also create a syntax error because you always have to end it in a semicolon. So we're gonna start with assigning a variable. So when you assign a variable, you gotta start with entering the data type. The data type could be integer. An integer is a whole number, either negative or positive. Okay, so 5, -5, 20, 30, numbers like that. So in order to assign it to a variable, you would type the data type first, so it would be int, and then you would have to type pay, which would be the variable name, and equals 5. So that would, and then you would end it with a semicolon, and that would be a way of assigning a variable to that would be basically assigning a variable. Also there's also different data type as well, and I'm gonna go over that in the next video, so I'm just gonna do the basics right now. Also, you could accept data and also output data to your console window as well. To output data to the console window, you would use the cout statement, right? So it would be cout, and then you would type greater than sign, and then you would put hello world. You would end it with a semicolon, and that would be a way to output to the console window. You could also use the cin statement as well to input data. So you would use cin, and then you would use program. The next video would go into more in depth in variable names and assigning variables and what are different objects and data types that you could use in C++ as well, and different headers as well. I don't know if I'm gonna go through that the next video, but I hope I was helpful. If I did not explain something well enough, I really recommend these books, or you could just search on YouTube. Stick around for the next one.